I'm Whitney.
I'm Mindy.
And I'm Deb.
We're three best friends who love nerdy things.
Well, some people think we're nerdy, but we think we're pretty awesome.
This is our nerdiest thing.
This season, we are discussing Jennifer L. Armentrout's From Blood and Ash, all of the books in that series, plus the Flesh and Fire series as well. We are spoiler friendly, so listen at your own risk. Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to our nerdiest thing. Today we are talking about From Blood and Ash chapters 28, 29, and 30. Before we get going, Deb, will you please share about our nerdiest cocktail?
This week's cocktail is super duper yummy and Making Metal's take on the blood orange margarita. The Amaro ingredient that's listed on our Instagram is actually a blood orange liqueur. So you put that with some blood orange juice and their 2-pepper agave syrup, and it is chef's kiss. Perfect. So delicious.
Mindy, can you spin the wheel o' names to find out who is doing our nerdiest recap? Is it me? I hope
it is.
Yay! Okay.
I literally have done one this whole season.
And yet I'm still going to not be good at it. So away we go. All right. Let me get the timer going. And we'll start. So Hawk is in charge of taking Poppy to Carcedonia, and he won't let Tawny come. So it's Hawk and 8 other guards, some of which she knows and some of which she doesn't. They go through the barren plains and lots of conversations and flirting with Hawk, and she gets to ride the horse with him, and then they stay the night in the Blood Forest, and then he uses his hands in a very skillful way, and that girl does get hers. And that's it. And that was 30 seconds.
That was actually like the best one in a long time.
I wanted to really hear the words fingered come out of your mouth.
Well, you know, I was realizing, and we'll get to it in a couple of minutes, but I was realizing that, like, technically that's not
really.
what he does.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, yeah.
He talks about
He
how
talks
he
about
would do it.
he would, yeah.
Listen, the notes that I took.
I definitely was not reading this in the car today while my husband and children were in there, and I definitely was not squirming in my seat.
Oh my gosh. We'll get there.
I was pulling this number where I'm holding the book, but I'm holding it where no one can see it.
Yeah, I don't want anyone to look over my shoulder. Yeah. Before we get into it, everything sounds dirty to me right now. Before we really get into it, Mindy, can you please share our nerdiest vocabulary?
Yes. So we're, again, back to our original form here. I decided to go back to a name.
Yay.
And it's Kieran.
Yay.
Because this is really the first time we meet him in this book.
Kieran.
Pretty much,
right? Like
yeah.
we see him in the extra bonus.
Okay,
Hawk
so
POV.
I have a quick question, though. So, Delano or Kieran, who would you want to...
Who would you rather?
Yeah.
Delano.
Like in a
Okay, how about both?
that's what I was gonna say, like in a nerdy and dirty way.
This
or
isn't a
just
why
like,
choose. This is a you have to choose.
Look, I'm reading a why choose right now, and that's all I can think about. So,
All right, Whitney.
This is a really
Be less
tough,
horny than
this
Mindy.
is a really tough choice for me. I think that I would probably choose. Oh gosh, I would probably choose Delano. Honestly,
I thought that you might.
I love Delano. I think he's like Kieran is funny with the banter, but I feel like Delano is funnier, like just his general personality.
I feel like Kieran would. I love it. I love the banter too, but I feel like my personality, Kieran, would make me feel bad.
Well, I was
And I would
going to
probably
say,
cry.
I feel like Kieran could put up with my shit, but Delano could not.
Well, that's I feel
yeah.
like you and Kieran would probably have a similar like Kieran and Reaver
We would either
kind of dynamic.
hate
You know what
each
I mean?
other or love each other, right?
Or both.
We would probably hate fuck. Is
Why
what we
not
would.
both? Yeah, why not both?
I mean,
Tell
if
us.
Kieran and Weaver hate fuck, I'm going to be super into that.
I don't think that's gonna happen.
I said Weaver.
I
Sorry.
know you did. I knew what you meant,
Reaver.
though.
Yeah, but the listeners, I don't want them to think I'm dumb.
Tell us more, Mindy.
So, yes.
Once again, we've interrupted you.
This is our nerdiest
It's par for the
interruption
course. Our nerdiest interruption, yes.
Sorry.
So Kieran is a name of Irish origin, and it comes from the Gaelic O Kieran, like O apostrophe, but it's
Kieran.
O Kieran. O apostrophe Ciaran, but it's pronounced O Kieran.
Oh, Kieran.
O Kieran. It means little dark one, which I don't think he's very little.
No,
But he is
Mindy.
dark. Or
According to chapter whatever in War of Two Queens. No,
he is not. Or black haired. And it's the name of Ireland's first boy.
Did you say
First boy.
It's the name of Ireland's first boy.
It's the name of Ireland's. What?
You were doing all
That was my
English.
old Chaucer. That was my Chaucer impression.
Yeah, we will.
Oh my God.
We literally haven't gotten past
I
the
think we are all so tired. So speaking of our nerdiest cocktail, my husband just walked in with drinks.
The door just like opened
by itself.
Paper, snow, a ghost. Thank you, sir.
Hey, will you take this nasty ass shit too? That was the one I made. That was not our nerdiest cocktail.
It was our shittiest cocktail.
It tasted like floor.
Hold on. Oh no, that's tasty. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tequila.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
And
you.
a good day to
Thank
you.
you, sexual butler.
Anyway,
And producer, editor.
so Kieran is Ireland's first boy.
His first boink.
It's the name of Ireland's firstborn saint and 25 other saints from Ireland. So this is like a very revered name. in
Ireland's
Ireland.
not a very big country. How do they have so many saints?
They have 25 saints named
I don't know if it's
Kieran.
necessarily all Irish. It's the name of Ireland's firstborn saint, and then 25 other saints have the name. But Kieran's a very
Okay.
Irish name, so I would assume probably it is all. I don't know.
You know, it's funny because if I heard the word Kieran outside of this book, I would go, yeah, that is an Irish name. But I think of it as our amazingly dark skinned.
Right, like
Right.
he is not
I
does not
imagine
look
him
Irish
not
at all.
Irish.
I envision them having a very like almost very gracious British accent because that's how the narrator does it. And so I can't think of that name as being Irish, but it is. You're right.
But here's the fun part. So ohbabynames.com.
Oh, we're just now getting to that.
Yeah. ohbabynames.com lists these characteristics of a person named Kieran. So Kierans are dependable, solid,
Yes.
practical, hardworking, industrious, studious, and conservative.
He's not conservative.
I was going to say everything but conservative,
But
except
I do
it depends
think
on the
he-
context.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do think he's conservative when it comes to the plans
Yes.
and like staying on track.
risk taking,
Yes.
right?
So,
not
but he's- but
socially
not
conservative,
sexually
not
either.
sexually
Yeah.
conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Did you
I
say
get that.
sexually or socially? Because he's
Both.
not sexually
She said
conservative.
I said both.
She said socially, and I
He's
said
not
sexually.
socially or sexually
No.
conservative.
No, I
nobody,
mean, he'll just
nobody
fuck
in
in front of
Atlantia.
anyone.
Nobody in Atlantia, I feel like, is
Is
sexually
sexually conservative.
conservative.
No.
That's just
They're
like
just
not
like,
a
you
thing.
know what? Let's just do it. Right
Yeah,
here,
pretty
right now.
much.
Oh, there's a garden. No, there's a beach. There's a rock. Let's get it out.
I do have a bonus vocabulary. There's not a whole lot
Ooh.
to
See
it.
how long it takes you to get through this. If we keep
Hush,
interrupting.
you.
Deborah, fuck you.
Is that the vocabulary?
In Urban Dictionary,
I prepared
Deborah's
something.
defined as an old ass bitch.
I prepped that just for you.
For the record, I'm the youngest person on the planet with the name Deborah.
I think you probably are.
I am, yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to, that we are talking about, I always think of them as the ROUSs.
I literally wrote that down
Yeah.
more than once. A
The
rodent of unusual
unusual
size.
size.
I'm not sure they exist.
About the, okay, so here's
Okay.
the thing.
We jumped ahead of
Yeah,
you.
sorry.
Deb is so confused.
So, I'm talking about the things that Poppy, I almost said Deborah.
The Barrettes?
Yes. And I don't want to say it because that's how I will always probably pronounce
how
it.
the
Barrettes.
audiobook says it, but
Barrettes.
again-
Okay, good. No. Okay. So here's the bonus part. I tried to look it up. There's nothing in like any of the Blood and Ash wikis or anything that I could find that actually pronounced it how it's supposed to be pronounced. What I found, and I don't know if this is supposed to be a name or something else, but everything I saw that pronounced it spelled this way, it said Barrett. And I think it's supposed to be like a name, right? So that's all I could find. So I decided that we get to decide how to say it. Like we are in control of the pronunciation.
Well, it's gonna have to be majority rules because I thought Barrett.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, when I was reading it. Yeah.
See, I thought Barat.
Barat.
Oh, so we're all different.
You know what though? I'm right.
I mean, if the audio, well,
No.
I mean, the audio book.
I don't
is
trust
not
the
always
audio
I'm
book.
just teasing.
correct,
I'm the most confident
I mean,
person in the room.
it makes
so.
sense that the last part of the word would be pronounced as rat because
Yeah.
they're definitely supposed to be like rodent-like,
But they're
right?
not,
So-
though. They look like wild boars. She
No,
says.
they're the size
They're the
of wild
size.
boars.
Oh,
They
They're the
look like
size.
rats. The
Okay.
size. They're like 200-pound rats, which is fucking terrifying.
I know, right?
Yeah. We'll
Yeah.
get there. We'll get there in a minute. But
Can you
I wrote
imagine
the
getting
same
bit
thing.
by
as
one of
our
those
USs.
fuckers? Like, oh my god.
I don't.
Ugh.
Okay.
Anyway,
I don't really want to.
We'll revisit.
Is that your bedroom voice?
Can you imagine?
Say, no, Daddy, stop it.
Ew, no. Oh, man. Okay, so let's get into chapter 28. So at the end of the last section, Poppy had been sent to Carcedonia. The queen wants her back, right? So there was the attack on the Great Right, and everybody's concerned about the maiden. So Hawk is in charge of her travel, and because he is the only personal guard that she has left, which is really kind of sad. So this chapter opens up, it skips ahead like 30 minutes basically to Poppy's room where they're arguing about whether or not Tawny's going to come, which I really, really enjoy this whole conversation because I really like that Hawk stands his ground here, and you find out later that he's got like a much deeper reason for not wanting Tawny to come, right? Because he knows what's going to happen and he doesn't want to risk Tawny's safety because she's so important to Poppy. But it does make me really sad. Poppy says, "Gone was the Hawk who had held me so tightly and so tenderly only hours before. In his place was a royal guard Victor would have been proud of." And it makes me...
I wrote that
You
down
know what,
too.
though? I also wrote down whenever she's like, how can Hawk possibly be the lead of this? And someone says, well, he is your only royal
Yeah,
guard.
Jansen
And I was like,
says that.
I was like, well, that was real fucking rude.
I know. She was like, that threatened to sting. So I just ignored it, is basically what she said.
actually said, so I did. That statement threatened to sting, so I whirled on Hawk and did the only completely immature thing I could. I took it out on him.
But you know what? I love that she and Hawk are arguing like an old married couple.
I know.
It's really
some
cute.
of my favorite banter.
Well, and Jansen and Tawny are just like, we're just going to sit back and watch. We're just going to enjoy the show.
Tawny does try to step in and be like, hey, nobody asked me. And then they kind of like talk over her.
I know.
Shut up, Tawny.
I know. Bless her heart, Tawny. Because I feel like that whole thing, because Tawny does step in and is like, I don't want to go. Like, this
Yeah.
is really scary. He is absolutely right. And this is true. It's not like Hawk was making this part up, but he's basically like, we're not going to have that many people with us. We're going to be like camping. We're not stopping at hotels. We are not going to be able to focus on Tawny, right? Like, our only job is focusing on you, the maiden, Poppy, and Tawny will not be safe.
And this is no offense to Tawny. It's just the way she was raised. But this girl is not made
Oh,
for
there's- yeah.
like
No.
living in the wilderness
no
for 2
way.
weeks.
And she also says so herself that she's not like Puppy. She can't defend herself. She doesn't know how to use a weapon. She's definitely a liability.
Well, and they had this conversation before, basically, when Tawny was like, with everything that happened to Rylan in the garden, right? Tawny's like, I'm sorry that I wasn't there, but I would have just been screaming and a
Yeah.
liability. And Poppy tries to argue with her, like, well, I've showed you
Yeah.
how to protect yourself a little bit. She's like, yeah, but actually doing it, maybe she says that in this conversation. You teaching me how to use a dagger and me actually having to use it, very different things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't trust myself,
So I love in this part of the book that Hawk is just fucking over the veil, right?
I know.
I wrote that down too.
She tells him that he is essentially being ridiculous, and he goes, "No more absurd than standing here arguing with half of your face." And then at the end of this part, he tells her like to pack and get ready to go, and he goes, "And don't bother taking that damn veil. You won't be wearing it." And I'm like, "Yes, get rid of it."
Well, and I wrote down like he says you won't be wearing it. I wrote down ever again. Because
Yeah.
she doesn't.
That's true.
Right? Like
Exciting.
she no longer is. Once she leaves the Castle Tierman or whatever, like she is no longer the
That
maiden.
makes me wonder, actually, did she take her veil with her? Because,
I don't think she
don't think
did.
so.
but in her mind, she's expecting to go to.
But she has to pack lightly. And so,
I guess that she thinks they're going to have a veil
I was
for her
going to say,
waiting.
I think that she could safely assume that they would either have
Yeah.
clothes fit for the maiden or
Yeah.
very quickly get them, because she
Yeah.
thinks she's going to Wayfair Castle in
Right.
the capital, right?
That's
So
what I was thinking. I mean, she thinks she's going to be the maiden once they
Right.
get there.
I think she could probably safely
Yeah,
assume that they would
that's
have
true.
stuff for her, because she's not supposed to bring very much with her, and so I think that the line of thinking is they'll be cool with what we're doing because we're trying to keep you safe,
Right.
Like, I think that makes sense.
how sad did it make the both of you when you realized that she hadn't felt the sun and wind on her face in years?
I know.
I know.
Years. It's something that we really take for granted, but think about when it's warm outside in the morning and you walk out and you literally close your eyes and take a deep breath. And she's not had the capability to do that in like a decade at this point,
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's all she wants is to feel the wind on her face. Like, they literally are just horrible people to her. Mm-hmm. And even as a reader at this point, you still don't really see it.
Right before that, though, I noticed, I don't know that I've noticed this before. She is thinking through, Tawny's not coming. Everything's going to be different. I have to go to the Capitol. But then she stops herself from spiraling and says, I wasn't borrowing tomorrow's problems. And
Or
that's
today.
Right. Like
Yeah.
Hawk, Castile says that to her as advice, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's just focus on right now. We're not going to borrow tomorrow's problems today. And I don't remember her,
I don't remember her saying that.
ever thinking
Yeah.
anything close to that herself, which I just thought was really
That
interesting.
part just really tore me up because as she's going through, she's scared to leave. She's scared to leave everything she's known behind. She just lost Victor. Now Tawny's not going with her. Yeah. And it just made me so sad that, like she says, everything kept shifting and changing. And Tawny was the last of what used to be. So she's like, that was her last cling to, and it's not that she wants to live that life, but it's what she knows.
It's everything comfortable.
Yeah.
And everything that brings her comfort.
Yeah.
Right.
It just it broke my heart just thinking about that.
And I wrote down too, she's afraid to leave Tawny behind because everything is changing, and it's just like, oh my gosh,
You have no idea.
The next 12 months of your life are going to be nothing but constant change and revelation.
This is only the beginning.
One right
Yeah.
after the other,
Yeah.
constant. And it's just like, whew. Again, I've said this in a previous episode. By the end of the War of Two Queens, Poppy is pleased with where she is in her life, right? She's accepted and happy with the changes, but it's still a lot to deal with, right? It's not like she wishes they hadn't happened. Some of them I know she does, but it's a lot. It's a lot for anybody to deal with. I laughed when they're talking about how they're going to try to avoid the Dark One and dissenters on their trip to Carsitonia. It's like, ma'am, let's think about
There's no avoiding that.
Right. Let's think about who's with you for a second. I loved when Hawk says, you are not the maiden out here. You're Poppy, unveiled and unburdened.
I wrote that down too.
Because again, this is going to be one of the few last times that she doesn't have some kind of burden on her shoulders, a big responsibility, and then he gives her dagger back that he says he found the night of the attack on the right, which this dagger we've talked about before is from Victor, so it's got a lot of sentimental value. We find out later in book 4, The War of Two Queens, that there's some other stuff about the dagger that make it important and significant. But for her, this was a birthday present from Victor.
And it's her favorite one.
It's her favorite one. She keeps it on her all the time, but it's the last connection to Victor, right? So she is overcome basically to have it back and is speechless.
Did you catch that right before all that? Basically, she's completely lost all faith in the gods.
Yeah.
She says, I wouldn't pray. The gods had never answered my prayers before. But it's kind of ironic because she is one.
Well, and I thought that was funny because one of the things I mentioned last episode is that she prayed to the gods for Hawk to be safe during the attack. And I just thought that was interesting that...
Oh, yeah. So that worked.
Right. We talked about how that's not something that she does, right? So it talks about how worried she was. But I just thought it was funny. She's like, well, they never answered my prayers. Well,
they kind of did.
Right. You just asked for Hawk to be safe and he was. So, I'm just pointing that out.
That's how faith works, though.
Yes,
Yes,
100%.
exactly.
Yeah. I was trying to write down all the names of everybody in her crew, and then we only have half their names.
I know.
At this point, and I was like, well, because it says there's 10 people, but the only names we have so far are Poppy and Hawk, Kieran, Phillips, Eric, and Letty. Yeah, which I had forgotten Letty's name. I think we get maybe one or two other names in the next couple of chapters as they keep traveling, but I was like, ooh, let me make a list. And then it was like, nope. You only get half of them. And so at the end of this first chapter in this section, chapter 28, they are leaving the grounds basically of Castle Tierman. They're going through the rise and like out into the great unknown, basically. And Poppy says, somewhere in there, the castle, my present had become the past. I turned to the rise. Somewhere out there, my future awaited. And so it's this big metaphor, right, of going through the gates and like leaving one thing and going to something different.
And I never really thought about the fact that she's using the wall as a metaphorical wall too that separates her from the rest of the world.
Yes. Well, so, me English teacher, I was like, look at that symbolism. And so I did a kind of deep dive about walls. The rise is, like you just said, Deb, is a metaphor. It's a boundary between her past and the future. It's also a boundary between what is supposed to be safe versus dangerous, as far as like the craven outside the rise, and unknown
What's
threats.
funny is she's much more threatened inside
Exactly.
the rise
Right.
than she is
Exactly.
outside of it.
So I just looked up what walls are symbols for in literature and art. Walls are immovable, strong. They provide safety, but they are also symbols of entrapment and control. So there's that like dual meaning, right? Like it can be something very positive, but it could also be something very negative. It just depends on who's constructing the wall and what the purpose is,
and
right?
if you think about the fact that inside her room, the main entrance is made from stone, but the servants' quarters are made from wood, which is pliable and easy to break through.
Right. Different levels of strength and all that. Right. Walls oscillate between themes of separation and protection, right? So protecting versus entrapping. The ascended make people think that the rise is for protecting them, but it's really about keeping them in. It's about control, right? Because even the supposed danger of the craven are dangerous, but that danger is in some ways controlled by the ascended, right? So common examples of places just in the real world that use walls as kind of like metaphors. Churches consider their walls to be a place of separating holy, sacred, consecrated ground from the regular world, right? Churches are supposed to be special. So the walls separate what is worldly from what is spiritual. They're also churches supposed to be places of refuge and places that are supposed to be safe from sin. In geography, we know the Great Wall of China was built to be a literal protective wall, right? In Germany, back before it was torn down in the 80s, the Berlin Wall separated the two parts of the city. Walls have also been used a lot in art and especially in literature. A couple of examples from stories that I have personally read and really, really enjoy. Edgar Allan Poe. First, in The Cask of Amontillado, there is the main character basically gets tricked into this dungeon to like a wine cellar essentially and gets like chained to the wall, and then the narrator like builds a wall and like bricks him in, and
Basically
so
buries him alive
behind the wall. Exactly. So that is all about entrapment, right? That's not positive. The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe. The floorboards are keeping a corpse in. The floorboards are the boundary instead of the actual walls. The boundary there is like sanity versus insanity with the narrator. Margaret Atwood in The Handmaid's Tale. Harvard in that novel, Harvard becomes a prison, and they build a big wall around it with floodlights, barbed wire, and broken glass to keep people in from being able to escape. So you could do all kinds of symbolism with just like the floodlights, the broken glass, right?
We could do an episode of The Handmaid.
I know,
Handmaid's
right?
Tale. That would be a really good episode.
Add it to the list. We have like a never-ending list of all these bonus episodes. In the Bible, the famous Old Testament story of the Battle of Jericho in the book of Joshua, there's a wall of Jericho that the Israelites march around and blow their trumpets, and the walls come tumbling down, symbolizing, first of all, the wall's supposed to protect the city of Jericho, but the walls coming down are supposed to symbolize like the supernatural power of God, right?
If all it takes is trumpets to bring your wall down, you didn't do
your job very
with
well.
the power of the Lord, right? It's not just any old trumpet, right? And then my favorite example is in the American version of the TV show The Office, when they're doing, especially in the early seasons, when they're doing the one-on-one like confessionals with the different characters. Sometimes the characters are sitting with a window behind them, and sometimes they're sitting with a wall behind them. I listened to the Office Ladies podcast where they recap all the episodes, and they talked about how that was very purposeful, and depending on the character and what's going on in their lives. So like, for example, Jim and Pam, when they give those confessional interviews and the wall is behind them, is when Pam is still engaged to Roy. Jim and Pam are not dating. They see like no hope in their future. Like they're just stuck in the office and nothing's ever going to change.
Damn you, Office. Who knew?
And then when Pam and Roy break up and they start dating, especially, they start having a window behind them, which
What is
symbolizes
that
like the
podcast called?
future.
Remind
Office
me.
Ladies with Jenna Fisher and Angela Kenzie. With stories only people who were there can tell you. That's their
Tagline.
Are you
their
on that
tagline, yeah.
podcast or ours?
We're the Office Ladies. But yeah, so that was the Office one is my favorite one. But walls are, I don't know, like maybe it's the English teacher in me, but part of me is like, this feels very like, well, yeah, duh.
Mm-hmm.
But walls are very prevalent in different, even pop culture, right? They're Bible stories, art. There was way too much for me to even try to pull art, right? And I was like, well, it's a podcast. It's not a visual medium anyway. So I stuck with the stories and literature, but they're everywhere. There were so many examples of like, well, look, this wall features prominently in this story for this reason. Here's the symbolism. And I just thought it was really deep.
I mean, you got to think too, even going back to ACOTAR, they have their wall. And then
Exactly.
you also think about metaphoric walls, like people that put walls up to keep people out. Going
Right.
back to ACOTAR again,
What?
you know,
I
Like
don't do
emotional
that.
walls.
yeah, like
Yeah.
putting up shields so that you can't, but like, she tries to block him out.
Right.
Um,
Well, like Nesta. Nesta has these metaphorical walls in her mind where like Tamlin's glamour didn't work on her. And
Yeah.
that- yeah.
So
They're-
yeah, I mean,
they're
there's
very
so
prevalent.
much. Yeah, that's a very, very prominent symbol in a lot of things, really.
It made my English teacher heart happy. Like, hey, I used to teach the Telltale Heart. Hey, I used to teach the Cask of Amontillado and all that stuff. So, but yeah, so they walk through the rise and they go and they're on their way into their destiny.
The blood forest.
Yeah.
They're on their way to clit ribbon.
I wrote down my very first note for chapter 29, and I quote, "Bumping booties on the horse with Hawk."
Okay, so the one horse trope is one of my favorite ones because it's also forced proximity. And
yeah.
you can't ride a horse and not go with the rhythm of the horse, right? You can't stay sitting up straight. You can't have like perfect posture on a horse at all times. So you're forced against this person, right?
Well, and she talks about, like, I tried to stay up straight, and it really hurt,
And
so
one
I
of-
gave up.
One of my favorite pop culture references with the one horse trope is Outlander.
Oh, yes.
Man, it's so good. When he wraps the blanket around her.
Oh, no, he wraps his kilt around her.
Yeah. Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
His
What is
tartan.
it? Your teeth are chattering so hard. No, wait. You're shivering so hard you're making my teeth chatter.
Yeah, but I mean, she literally like rides up to
Yeah,
the
she
castle up against him.
Yeah.
I say rubbing clits, and you're like, "Oh, Deborah," and then I'm like, "The castle," and you're like, "Oh yeah."
Oh,
But
man.
I do love me some Jamie and Claire Fraser.
I know, right?
Watch it, read it, love it.
Oh, I thought you were telling me, watch it,
No.
like, be careful. And I was like, what
telling-
did I do? Did I make a face?
No,
Like,
I'm telling the listeners,
yeah, definitely.
read it, watch it, love it.
It is. Live it, repeat it.
I would say though, if you're gonna read Outlander, watch it first because she does write in the Gallic vernacular, and it's hard
Yeah,
to.
it
It
is
would be hard
difficult.
to read if you hadn't watched the show. I think.
Put
See,
the
I read it
subtitles on.
first.
I didn't. I think I would
But
have
you're
struggled.
smarter than me.
That is not true.
It kind of
You're smarter than me.
Oh, hell no.
One thing that Poppy's enjoying this time with Hawk on the horse, right? Not just because like it turns her on, but just the closeness and the banter and the flirting. She says, when we reach our destination, this would be over. And it's like, I mean, yeah, but also no, right? Like not in the way she thinks.
Right.
But I mean, she's thinking she's going to ascend. And
Well,
he'll-
sure,
he'll
yeah.
be gone.
Well, she thinks she's just going to go right back to being the maiden. And it's like, I mean, this is over in a sense because what you think is happening is not actually happening. And there's a lot of truth that you have to find out. But
I didn't remember reading this last time that she assumes that when she ascends, she's going to have a husband.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that too.
I had forgotten that too. Yeah, they
And
do
she
have
knew
this
it would
conversation.
be a loveless marriage.
I know.
Which is
Yeah.
really sad because she says, Ian is this very verbal person and he's never even talked about his wife, and that makes me super duper sad. And we talked about this before. We don't know who Claudia is. We don't know if she
I know.
actually exists. We don't know anything about this person. So it's interesting to me that she's like, you know what? It's almost like she is at her bachelorette party and she's like, I'm going to get it out of my system.
Poppy has this example of Coralina and Leopold as deeply loving each other and enjoying each other's company and caring for each other and having that familiarity and that comfort level and that level of love for one another. And she does not think that will ever happen for her. And that in and of itself makes me sad. But then especially thinking that she's going to marry, and I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but she thinks she's going to marry somebody that's going to look at her scars and her appearance the same way that the Duke does.
That's
right.
That's the sad part of it.
I know.
Unfortunately,
I hate
that would be true, but
Probably,
we know
yeah.
now that she was never going to get to marry anyone, no matter what.
Right.
Can we talk about how savage Hawk was when he said the Duke Tierman was a cunt and I'm glad he's dead?
I wrote that down too. I loved that.
Okay, can we talk about first though how he told her to pack light and then brought Miss Willis
The
out?
journal.
Right?
Oh my gosh. And then pulls it out in front.
Right.
I mean,
No, he
he's,
gets her to get it out.
he's so shameless of like that is super inappropriate. I know she's not supposed to be the maiden like in anybody's consciousness right now, but she still is, right? And he's
Right,
like, let's read about this sex book.
So he does say, "You're not going to read to me," and she goes, "No, absolutely not." And I wrote, "Yes, you will."
Not today,
and then he said, and I love it because you can like picture it in your head. He's like whispering to her. He's like, "How far did you get?" And then she's like, I almost finished it.
And he's like, you'll have to tell me about it.
Yeah, that made me laugh a lot. Because she's super embarrassed, but she's not so embarrassed that she completely shuts it down.
Right.
She still like engages with the flirtation and like
she ends up
banters
smiling
with them
and
about
laughing
it.
about
She
it.
answers his question about
Yeah.
how far she read, right? You like,
But if you think of her age, do you remember how horny you were when you were 19? I mean, it doesn't matter how sheltered you are at that age. Your
I know.
hormones are going crazy. So, of course, she was going to read
biology
it. Of course
happens
she's-
no matter your background.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
She is interested in what happens to your bodies, and she is interested in living. And she does tell Hawk that later, like, why were you at the Red Pearl? She said to
Right.
live. And this is part of her living. Even if she has to do it vicariously, she wants to know what everyone else is doing.
Yeah.
Miss Willa's Diary is the equivalent to Forever for me. Did you all ever read Judy
No.
Blume's Forever? That was like
No.
the sexual awakening of
Oh,
of
no.
the 80s.
I was going to say Miss Willa's Diary is the equivalent of porn for me. But
Actually, Miss Willa's Diary is a lot more explicit than Forever, but like
I was
Forever's the
gonna say,
book.
Judy Blume wrote porn.
No, but the Forever
Goodness, no.
Forever
Hello,
is,
Margaret.
it's a little bit more of, it's like a more, I guess, young adult book, but I mean, they have sex in it. And so, but it's like not anything like obviously Miss Willa or
Right.
anything that we're reading. But at the time when you're a kid and you're reading and you're used to like, Are
Yeah,
You There, God?
yeah.
It's Me, Margaret? And, those kinds of things. And you
That's
read it and
true.
you have this like sexual awakening from it. And then there's like, I definitely read that chapter a lot.
I'm trying to think of what book was my sexual awakening.
I was,
and I
me
can't.
too. I think the equivalent for me would probably be like the Sweet Valley High, like when they were actually in high school, and then because they started out as like
I love those books, too.
middle school students. I think in middle school in the first books, which is what I started reading.
Well,
or maybe young high school.
They started out with Sweet Valley High, and then she did the sort of prequels, I guess.
Okay, so maybe
Sweet
that's-
Valley Twins is what they
That's
were
what
called.
I read first.
And yes, I'm
And
a
then I
huge
read
nerd, and
the
I
high
have
school.
all those books. I'm collecting them.
I love that. So I will say, I think maybe I don't remember what book I read that first in because I didn't have a lot of boundaries and I was allowed to watch whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
So I knew what sex was at a very young age and like explicit sex because like my
Right.
mom wanted to be a friend and not a parent.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I literally watched and did whatever I wanted to. So I mean, I wish I could remember that though. I
Yeah.
think that's interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating, intriguing.
I wasn't
captivating.
allowed to watch Dawson's Creek.
You weren't?
But Pacey,
I know. I snuck an
that
episode.
is such a Whitney show.
I
know.
snuck an episode one time, and it was like really, really early on, maybe the first season, when Pacey is like sleeping with his English teacher.
Oh,
or
yeah. That's
something.
like the first few episodes.
right. And I was like,
Scandalous.
yeah. I mean, I was so,
remember,
and then I
though,
got in trouble for sneaking an episode of Dawson's
thinking it
Creek.
was so scandalous because he's in bed with that teacher and he asks her how many partners she's had and she's like, well, there was like Dave and John and then like my high school boyfriend, and she goes, that's you. And I was like, ew.
Yeah, I hate that.
Honey, that's
trope.
grooming and rape.
I know, right?
That's not
like
cool. But
I mean,
because it
that's
was
whole
a
other
woman
tangent,
doing it to
but-
a man, no one said
Exactly.
anything about it.
Yeah.
There was an episode of Seventh Heaven, which I was allowed to watch.
Seventh Heaven.
There's pause. There's a recap guy. There's a guy on TikTok. I can't remember what his
The
name
only
is.
difference between Seventh Heaven and Dawson's Creek is they went to church.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, hold that thought. He does recaps of Seventh Heaven episodes, and he's like, "This show was so crazy," and I watch it now, and I'm like, "That was crazy," but we watched it all the time. So there's an episode where Mary, Jessica Biel's high school basketball coach, who's also like a science teacher or something, was being very flirtatious with her and like crossing the line and being weird. And the whole episode is about like one of the younger siblings is like, this is really weird. And she's like, no, it's not. It's totally fine. And then he like gives her a back massage or something. And she's like, I'm uncomfortable. And that's the difference between Dawson's Creek and Seventh Heaven, right? Is like a teacher is creepy and it's immediately called out as like, that makes
But it
me
was
feel
because
weird.
it was a man to a woman too.
Right. Well, that's
Yeah.
true too. But I was allowed to watch that. I wasn't. Shout out to Linnell.
Also, I mean, how bad can a show be if it's like Seventh Heaven?
I know there's no greater feeling. I could sing the whole thing to you, but I
My
won't.
preacher's kid husband, I feel he's like probably upstairs putting the kids awake. You know how a dog's ears perk up?
He
I
just-
feel like that just
Someone somewhere singing the Seventh Heaven the theme song.
because they watch the shit out of that show.
And then
growing up.
fast forward, and the
Oh,
lead
man.
actor in that is a child
yes.
pornographer.
The guy that does the recaps constantly like makes little comments of like, maybe we should have
The
called Chris
blonde
Hansen.
dad?
Not
the one that plays the dad.
The dad who's the pastor.
He's a pedophile.
I don't think it was, well,
I can't remember if it was that or if it was sexual
I think it
assault
was
or
like
something.
messages or potential. I don't know, but it was bad. Whatever
Just
it
don't
was
do
bad.
it. Don't do it.
So they anyway they arrive to the Blood Forest, which is kind of like this infamous creepy, it's kind of like a haunted forest basically, where the trees are blood red, the leaves are red, the trees are secreting liquid that looks like blood.
And you know what happens when
And
the
there's bones
temperature
on them.
drops? What does that mean when the temp drops?
Ghosts.
Ghosts? Oh yeah. I was like something sexy. I don't know.
Put the blanket around her, Hawk.
I know, right?
She's shivering.
So
I love how she describes it, though. She says it was a sight as horrifying as it was disturbingly beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wondered
I
if
love that
she
line.
would. I wondered if everybody thinks it's beautiful or if there's something in her
That
like
sort of is attracted to it.
yeah, because she's got that primal like
Yeah.
power or whatever. I wondered that, but obviously we don't get to see other people's POV at this point. But
Well, we do see her later in book 2 react differently to like the fog in the mountains
Right.
because of her primal
The primal
powers.
mist.
Yeah.
And so I do wonder if she's even seeing different things than they are.
Like all her
That's true. She
senses
might be.
are affected by that.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, and she could zero in on stuff that other people aren't noticing at all. That's true.
Right.
Because we don't find this out until book 3, Crown of Gilded Bones. But the reason that the Blood Forest is there is because Malek, the former king of Atlantia / son of Nyktos and the consort, he is entombed somewhere deep in the Blood Forest.
Is it just him or are there other gods there too?
As far as we know, it's just him.
I
Okay.
thought there were other gods too.
I
or
kind of
maybe we
did too,
just
but
don't
I
know.
yeah.
Because
Because then I questioned. I was like, because I know they don't know that Malek's there, but I kind of questioned if the Atlanteans knew why it was
When
red.
they unearthed Colas, where is he buried?
he's underneath the Temple of Theon
Oh, okay.
in Carcedonia.
Gotcha.
Because the guard Phillips says when she notes there's no leaves on the ground, the guard Phillips says this place is not natural, and it just made me wonder if anybody in that party knew why it was. But I'd forgotten that it might have just been Malek that's under there and not other.
Well, he's definitely entombed there. I don't know that we are told that any other gods are there. Maybe they are, but I don't think we're told that. However,
I think maybe I'm thinking that like they are saying if a god is buried somewhere, it will turn
would
that
be-
way. Yeah,
I guess the only reason I think there's more gods buried there is we don't see blood forests everywhere. And if there's a god buried, they're supposed to sprout a blood forest tree.
it's not necessarily that the god is buried. It's
they dropped blood.
if their blood is spilled.
That's right.
Which is why when Poppy gets taken by Lord Cheney, a blood tree pops up. When she
Right.
gets ascended by Castile, the blood tree pops up. I think one grows in the temple when she gets attacked by
well, and when
all those
they
people.
when they cut their hands during the marriage ceremony, one pops up too, doesn't it?
I don't remember if
Because they drop blood onto the soil.
they do, but that's part of the marriage ceremony. That's not like getting hurt. You know what I mean?
still blood.
Like,
it's still blood.
well,
spilled.
but it's blood spilled for that different magic. Like
Wait,
it's for
is
a
it a-
different magical
Is
purpose.
it a blood tree? Or I thought for some reason I thought it was a burning tree.
It's
Okay,
a blood tree. Well,
That
because
makes
Potato,
sense then.
potato.
I know, right?
Red
that
leaves.
makes sense then, though, that it would. And I know they see it as a sign that
but it's not
a
always.
blessing.
It's not always a sign of God's blood being spilled, because when Poppy ascends, all of the golden trees of Ios turn red, and she's like, oh no, that must be bad. And then Elowana is like, well, no, they were red when Malek was king, when it was like a deity.
Oh, so a deity's alive again type of thing?
Well, when it was like when a deity or a child of the gods was in charge of Atlantia, they turned red. So it doesn't always have to be that a god got hurt. It does happen when a god gets
Yeah.
hurt. But the fact that the blood forest existed wouldn't necessarily have to mean
Right.
that a god got hurt there or was entombed there.
Well, and
You know what I'm
obviously,
saying?
if they were like that when Malek was ruling, it's not just
Then
you
it-
know what I mean.
it
That
wouldn't
it's
be
related
weird.
to him. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think that we know what the Ascended think about that, because Isbeth definitely does not know that Malek is entombed.
Right.
She thinks he's like straight up dead, right? So she has no idea that he's entombed anywhere, and certainly not that he's entombed in the Blood Forest.
how do they find out that? Who tells them that that's why?
Elowana.
Okay,
Because that's Elowana is the one that says, like, we entombed him, and I can
Okay.
tell you where.
So-
She and Willa.
Can we talk about, even though there's not leaves on the ground, there's bleached bones
gross.
I know. It's gross.
everywhere?
Ew.
And it's like dead craven, dead animals. I mean, I'm assuming there's probably human bones in there somewhere too.
Well, she asked, "Is it all animals?" And he says, "No."
He's
And she
like, just
says-
don't look.
Yeah, and then she says something. Is it craven? And he says some of them. And you're
Right.
supposed to assume that it's human bones are there.
And she goes, and it's not like I could close my eyes now. And I'm like, well, yeah, because it's like when you drive and you see something horrific on the side of the road, right?
Right.
Yeah, and you're just
Right.
like, oh, there's a bone, there's a bone. God, there's a femur, there's a
It's
skull,
gross.
right?
Yeah, before it gets real naughty in the Blood Forest, I did catch that Poppy is basically admiring Hawk's long, graceful fingers.
I noticed that too.
and I said, "Naughty foreshadowing, GLA."
Before we go into happy orgasm time, can we take a cocktail break?
Yes.
Sure,
Do 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 do.
making muddle.
Craft cocktails don't have to be fussy or ingredient heavy. Make and Muddle is here so that you can have a delicious 3-ingredient cocktail every time. Spend more time reading and less time mixing. Make and Muddle. Cocktail evangelist here to spread the good news about booze.
So they're camping in the Blood Forest, and Hawk is like, "You're very cold. Let me lay down with you." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is so inappropriate." And then he's like, "Well, actually, I know that you have nightmares. Victor told me about this. If you have a nightmare and freak out, you're going to attract like all the craven, all the bear
How
rats.
convenient, Hawk.
Right? I wrote down, I'm like, was that really even part of his thought
No,
process?
no,
or
hell
was
no.
it like, oh yeah, you also have nightmares? You know what I mean?
It was she's shivering and I want to lay by her.
Well,
so
yeah.
I will come up with any excuse possible to go lay by her.
The nightmare thing is true though,
Yeah.
right?
Sure,
and it is
absolutely.
valid. Like, I need to
But
stop you
how
from
many
screaming.
times have you wanted to do something and been like, well, I'll just say it's for this reason.
I know. Well, she does the same thing, right? She's like, this is really inappropriate. And he's
But
like,
okay.
Right. And she does all this justification of like, well, I am really cold and it is, the whole nightmare thing is true. And I wrote down, I said, Niktos and Serafina truly don't care, babe. That's what I wrote down. Like,
So in
maybe the gods will forgive me.
I bring this up every week, but in the audiobooks on this part when he's like whispering to her, he's like, I know you have nightmares, Poppy. And I'm like, oh,
Yes.
I love how
keep saying it.
I love how he thinks that sleeping with her sounds better than sleeping beside
Next to her? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like,
Right.
that doesn't track.
Well, and he says, I didn't realize we were back to pretending we hadn't done all those other inappropriate things. Not that I'm surprised.
Okay, before he gets there, though, she does have a moment where she's like, was Hawk asleep already? If he was, I was going to be so irritated. And I wrote, is this my life?
Yeah. Like,
Every night I go to bed and my husband's like sawing logs and I'm like fucking awake staring at the ceiling.
Yeah.
well, for her too, though, I think it's part of her insecurity of like, I am so aware of him and his body and how close he is to me that I can't sleep. And if
Well,
he's
he couldn't either.
well, but she doesn't know that, right? Like she thinks he's so unaffected by her and doesn't truly like think about her the same way that she thinks about him. He would be able to fall asleep super easily. You're a pure, untainted, and untouched maiden, which like, okay, well, he's, kissed her nipples. So he knows
She's not
that
untouched.
she's not, right?
He didn't kiss him wet. He sucked
What
on
did-
him.
Oh, well.
He licked him.
She was reading about love. Miss Willa's diary.
He told her that
he
wasn't
kissed
love.
her. The chosen, who's saving herself for a royal husband, who, by the way, will not be pure, untainted, or untouched. And that's where they have this whole conversation about her, like thinking that she's going to marry an ascended who's basically going to think that she's hideous because she has these scars, right? But I loved that Hawk mentions that she's saving herself allegedly for her husband, which is not what she's doing.
No.
Right? Like,
she
that's
does not
not-
care about that.
Right. Like, that's not part of it. It's the whole maiden being given to the gods thing.
And that's something I love too about the prequel series is that Serafina also is not saving herself. They don't live under these archaic rules. Like, yes, the men in this world do think that women should do that, but
Right.
none of the women do, which I love.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's bullshit.
Right. Yeah. The whole chastity thing is only a thing for the maiden, but not for marriage, just for like the weird religious.
But wouldn't you say
Mess of
that
it all.
in Soulless, women are still regarded that way? Not so much in Atlantia.
Regarded what way? What
Like
do you
that
mean?
they should be chaste.
I don't know because
I feel like maybe the ladies in wait are
I
expected to
don't-
be that way.
well, because Tawny makes that joke of like, if I have to serve the priestesses, they won't let me do it anymore, right? Like, who I have to
Wait,
take
she
the
said
vow
do
of
it anymore, or
no? She says like I'll have to take that vow of celibacy or whatever. Like, I don't want to do that, which would suggest that she's not celibate, right?
I guess I just never thought of.
Well, no-
I always think of them as very like to me, it feels very Victorian with them doing their embroidery in the parlor, and
So maybe we're
But
making our
that's-
own cultural assumptions
maybe,
about it.
yeah.
But that's still Poppy, right? Is that all the ladies in wait, or is that just Poppy
they're
that
all
has to
I
go?
mean, Defina drops her embroidery.
Yeah, but that she was making her. That wasn't like I have to do my embroidery because it's part of my schooling. It was I'm making my mask for the rite.
But see, I got the impression.
Do you know what I mean?
But I get the impression that that's what they do. They like have tea with the
I do too.
lords and the
maybe
ladies,
that's
and they
leisurely,
teach them.
but
Yeah, I mean,
I guess I
know.
don't equate that kind of leisurely, like courtly lady behavior with being
I just
like
assume
pure.
if you're
you
not
know?
allowed to fight, you're not allowed to fuck.
Well, that might be true.
I mean,
but
And I think maybe you're right, Deb. That I'm putting
no,
my
us, not just you.
Yeah,
I did
like
it.
our culture.
we're putting our cultural sort of
bias.
yes,
Bias.
cultural
yeah.
bias on on this situation when it's not explicitly said.
yeah, that's. I mean,
So I
that's
was
true.
filling in gaps that maybe somebody who isn't from the Western culture would feel
it
that
makes
in.
sense to
Yeah.
us, though, right?
Yeah.
Like the way that our culture.
I mean, women definitely
developed.
aren't equal in solace by any means. So I just assumed that also meant sex. But you have a
Yeah.
really good point where you're like, well, they do talk about doing it.
Yeah.
well, and in that first couple of chapters at the Red Pearl, one of the things that Poppy says is she's jealous of the other women who aren't afraid.
But those are not
You know?
ladies in wait. Those aren't like what you would call like classy women either.
No, the people working
And
there, but
for the record, I'm not saying that having sex makes you unclassy. I want to say that. I'm
do
just
you
saying
mean the
in this
people who
book.
work there, or just
or
anybody
even
who was
like
there?
Britta, right?
'Cause
She's a servant, so
Yeah.
she's not going to be with the royalty,
Right.
And like, so I'm thinking like Defina, Lauren, Tawny. Like, I think they have sex, but they're not supposed to talk about it.
Maybe. I don't know. I
don't know.
I don't get that same
JLA,
impression. But
when we talk to you next, can you let us know?
Yeah.
when you email us about our episodes and everything we get right and
will
wrong.
sleepover with JLA.
I will say that JLA works with Blue Box Press, which is a PR company, and they do like our posts a lot, which I really do appreciate, and they do comment on them. So thank you so much, you all.
Shout out to Blue Box Press.
So can we talk about how when she talks about her parents and she talks about love at first sight, Hawk tells her that it does exist.
I know.
But then she thinks he's talking about someone else.
I know.
I'm like, no, Shay's a bitch.
She's talking about you. Yes, I loved that. I wrote that down too. I love to, she says, I am the maiden. And he's like, well, how do you feel about that? Like, how do you really feel about
Yeah,
that?
he's actually asking her questions that nobody's ever like,
Right.
asked
He's
her
the
before.
only one. He's not the only one who cares.
Right.
But he's the only one who
Challenges
has the
her.
balls to
Yeah.
like ask her about it.
Yeah.
Right. And challenge. Yeah. Like you said, challenge her about it. I loved that love at first sight conversation. And she's talking about being afraid of her ascension. And I love that he validates her fears. Right. Because everybody else in Soulless is like, well, it's fine. And then that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It'll be okay.
Yeah. It's
We're not
just
going to tell
fine.
you. You just ascend.
Right.
You'll be okay.
Like no details, no explanations, whatever. And he's like, no, I would be freaked out by that too.
Yeah.
And actually is the only person to validate and like,
Yeah.
yes, it's normal that you feel this way. It's scary.
Yeah.
So it's okay to be scared, you know?
I do love that he says he would be terrified too. And she's like, you would be
Yes.
terrified? Like she's shocked by that.
Right. Like he's still a person.
Yeah.
Right. He says, you're just not what I expected.
And then we get to the good stuff. We
I
get
know,
to the
right?
good stuff.
So he's like, I'm going to help you go to sleep. And she's like, I'm so wound up. There's no way. And he said, she's basically he's like, there's no way you can do that. And he says, I can. And when I'm done, right before you drift off to sleep with a smile on your face, you're going to tell me I'm right. And I wrote in all caps, hot, hot. Yes.
He also says, I bet I can get you relaxed enough that you sleep like you're on a cloud basking in the sun. Which for me, who's a summer person, I'm like, I want to sleep like that.
Can we talk a little bit about that? Because first of all,
Which part?
all of it. First of all, I am not one of those people that relaxes after sex. Like I'm awake. Like my husband like rolls over and falls asleep, and I'm like staring at the ceiling, like you were talking about. Like I
don't do that after sex.
no. See, I mean, I do like it. Like amps me up somehow.
It invigorates you.
But I wanted
her
to,
loins.
and my loins, and I wanted to see if, like, I wanted to see what the actual like physiological, or I don't know. I just wanted to look at like how that all happens and why you would
What
be
happens,
sleepy.
Mindy?
Did you do a deep dive on
I did a deep dive on orgasms.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yes, yes.
Trigger warning.
So,
you can hit my trigger.
Dear listeners,
so
it's off the rails again.
I know.
You have a trigger too, dear listeners. And if you don't think you do, you
definitely
need,
do.
You do. You just need to find it.
So I started out thinking, like, why does an orgasm relax you and make you sleepy? And I found all these benefits of orgasm. So I got my information from mindbodygreen.com. And
I'm just sitting here thinking, if they're beneficial, I should have one.
right, you should, and you're gonna be like, I should be having one of these multiple times a day. So
Sometimes I do.
sometimes I do too. So I also got it from, there was like I don't know if it was like a blog or a website for this woman named Lee Noren, and she's a sex coach and therapist, and she had an article on
Does
hers.
she have a whistle?
That would be hysterical.
Give me another lap.
one more orgasm.
One lap around the clit, buddy.
And then also a little bit, I got a little bit off
You
of
said
Vogue.com.
clit first on this podcast. Don't look at me like
I
that.
know, and Robbie heard it and was like, I can't believe you said that on the podcast.
He
Oh,
liked
he
it.
loved it.
I don't know. Anyway,
All right, back to orgasms.
move on.
So essentially, when you orgasm, you release a ton of hormones, obviously. And cortisol is produced from your adrenal glands and it's basically considered the main stress hormone, right? So it works with certain parts of your brain to control mood, motivation, and fear. And then stress causes more cortisol to be released. So the more cortisol you have, the more stressed you are. It releases your bloodstream. But then when you orgasm, it actually releases oxytocin, which is sort of like the adrenaline, or the
One of the pleasure
happiness
ones.
hormone. Yeah. And that actually lowers your cortisol levels. So that essentially makes you less stressed and more relaxed. And then it also releases something called vasopressin, and it's a chemical that goes hand in hand with melatonin release, which we know that people take all the time to fall asleep.
I'd rather take an orgasm. than
Me too.
melatonin.
See, that's what I'm saying. You get your melatonin naturally instead of, orally.
I'll take my.
I'll take my
melatonin
orgasm orally too.
Yes.
So
I
another.
know this was gonna be a lot of interruptions.
I
Sorry.
mean, no, I'm all for interruptions.
We're too
Not when I'm having an orgasm though.
we're too immature for this deep dive.
I know. I don't know what I was
I would call us
expecting.
sexually awakened, not
Yes.
immature.
So another benefit is that it can boost your immune system. So chronic stress can weaken your immune system. We know that when you get really, really stressed out, you're more susceptible to getting, illnesses and stuff. So the oxytocin this oxytocin that's released during your orgasm, which helps curb your stress, will also boost your immune system. Orgasms.
I should be healthy as fuck.
I was just thinking, why do I have a cold right now?
Orgasms can actually lower pain. So good old oxytocin again. It and other endorphins are released that can take away pain, including relieving menstrual cramps and tension headaches. So the excuse of, honey, I have a headache maybe isn't the best excuse anymore.
Oh.
Yeah. So don't use that one.
I have said at times, not necessarily in that context, but like, I have really bad headache. And Robbie's like, it's really good for the headache.
Yeah. Darren actually says that all the time too. And I was like, no,
feel like-
no. And now
I feel like
know.
most husbands are
Yeah.
like, anything you complain about, they're like, what's good for that?
And I hate saying it, but I guess he was right. So
There's also like
Shout out to Darren.
being able to get in the mood when you have a headache.
I know,
Correct.
right.
Yes.
True.
Because no woman's like, you know what? Why don't you thrust me up against the bed while my head hurts?
But here's the thing. Something else I read is that it doesn't matter how you have an orgasm. So if you've got a headache, maybe you need to go get your vibrator out and take care of that.
There's no differentiation with
No.
like
The
yourself,
same-
a
the
vibrator,
same-
partner, whatever.
It doesn't have anything to do with penetration or anything. Any stimulation. When you have an orgasm, it's an orgasm, and
Whatever
the benefits
gets the job done.
The benefits are all the same.
I think it's really interesting that there is no differentiation between like if you give yourself an orgasm or if a partner like it's just as interesting to me that there's no differentiation for any kind of like emotional intimacy.
I mean, I would
you know what
say
I mean?
that there's a differentiation in terms of like how you feel about life, maybe. You know what I mean?
Well, I
You know,
mean,
like
yeah.
feeling
Yeah.
connected.
And
Yeah, like
emotionally,
your own-
yes, definitely. But
Yeah.
physiologically, there is no difference.
I would think that maybe would be a little less oxytocin or a little more
Those of us
oxytocin. You know
that
what
are
I mean?
dead
There may
inside,
be.
we still can fall asleep after sex.
There may be I'm sure there
Yeah.
are definitely levels of physiology like that, and there are probably some people that can't produce as much just because
sure.
that's how their body works. or
Everybody's
whatever.
body is different.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, they are the same.
That's just
Another thing that
Thought-provoking.
An orgasm.
orgasm. It's when an orca whale has
No, it's when you're really close and the guy finishes before you do. An orgasm. Or-casm.
Oh my god, I cannot talk.
Thanks a lot. You put me in the orgasm.
Another benefit of orgasm might be that it can improve your menstrual cycle, actually. And studies have shown that sexually active women are more likely to have regular periods.
That's not true.
Well, here's the thing, though. It is kind of like a chicken and the egg. It's not clear whether the orgasms make the periods regular or if the regular periods improve the orgasms.
Because that would suggest maybe like
Your hormone
balanced
levels are more-
hormones.
Yeah.
That's
so
interesting.
that's why it says it might improve. But there's no conclusive evidence on that. They also give you great skin because back to oxytocin and cortisol, increased cortisol levels increase oil production, creating clogged pores and breakouts on your
Whitney,
skin.
did you have a facial or did you have a facial?
I got to plead the fifth on that
Ew.
one. Guys, my sister listens to this podcast.
She knows you have
And your
facials
husband.
done
Oh.
by the guy. by the guy at your salon.
What?
Okay, now I know something new about you. I was talking about the actual facial that you go and get from the gay guy at the salon who puts,
He is great.
I was going to say who puts stuff on your face.
In what way?
Every way.
Yeah.
We're off the rails.
You are. I was actually talking about your facial. You nasty.
Okay. Yes, this is all on me. I'll accept that. Do you have more about orgasms,
I
man?
actually have 2.5 because I haven't finished the skin one.
But
She's going to hit the Or-Casm.
So
This episode is titled the OR-Chasm.
Your skin looks great.
well, actually, when your cortisol levels are up, then you get too much oil and it creates clogged pores and breakouts on your skin.
So you have to have an orgasm to drop the
When you
oil.
have your orgasm, the oxytocin release lowers the cortisol and you won't get as many pimples.
Nice.
Yep. Then also
hormones.
it increases your circulation of your pelvic floor.
Ooh.
So
Oh, yeah.
when you orgasm, your pelvic floor muscles contract rhythmically, increasing pelvic floor circulation, which distributes all your nutrients and hormones where they're needed to be in your body. And it was funny. This was on that website of the sex coach and therapist. And she said, other ways to get your pelvis moving: hula hooping, hula dancing. No, listen. I know, right?
Hey, honey. I got the hula hoop
No,
out.
listen. So she says hula hooping, hula dancing, and belly dancing. And I wrote, sounds fun, but I would rather have the orgasm.
Hey, honey.
gosh.
I'm not going to be home for a while, so if you want to grab the hula hoop.
Knock yourself out.
Put on my hula skirt and go to town.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't. I have a friend who does belly dancing, and I've always just.
Does she have beautiful skin?
She does, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she does have beautiful skin.
Does she seem content all the time?
That's a deep question. That's like when in book 3, when Netta's like, I saw your brother, and Bobby's like, did he seem happy? And Netta's like, I don't know. I can't say that I could tell if he was happy or not. Anyway, sorry. I was just
Y'all
thinking.
bringing it back to the book.
No, I was just thinking like
Yeah, no,
how
seriously.
how self conscious I would be, like belly dancing, hula hooping, and hula dancing of like.
But here's
Here
the
it
thing.
all
So
is.
this brings,
Like,
this
check
brings
me
it
out.
back to the last point. So having an orgasm actually makes you bolder because when you climax,
Well.
the lateral orbitofrontal cortex,
Oh,
yes,
the sexiest part of the brain.
sexiest part of the brain. It's the part of your brain that steers logic. It tunes out. Like basically you go into a trance state.
Yes.
So you might just throw caution to the wind and make bolder decisions, become more confident, take more risks.
I mean,
So-
you do when you're in like the throes of passion.
Yeah, like,
drown out the world.
There-
Yeah, that's true.
They actually say
And if
that
you're
your
not,
brain,
you're not doing it right.
your brain actually goes into a trance, like almost like a hypnotic state, so that you're just basically in that moment only. So, but I guess that technically isn't really. It could be a benefit, but maybe more of a cautionary tale. Like unless you have, unless you have a stick up your ass. I mean, maybe this isn't a benefit.
Sometimes that makes people orgasm.
That is true.
So I just want to say,
Gosh.
if you are a man or a woman that is threatened by what we're saying, or you're threatened by this chapter of the book, just read what Hawk does and copy it.
And
That's all
know
you
that
have
we
to
were
do.
all turned
Dude.
on while we were reading
Right.
this.
All he does is it tells you exactly what to do, and then where to press when you would, and where to circle when
And
you
keep
would.
in mind, this is all happening with
Clothes on. Like, it can happen, and I mean, if you are doing it right, she won't care that she's embarrassed that she has clothes on.
Yeah.
Like, because I think some people would be like, "Oh my god, like you're gonna make me get off with my clothes on." That's great. If your lover can do that, can you?
Congratulations.
Congratulations, right. So if you are threatened by your woman reading romance, maybe you should read some of these chapters, because there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with your partner wanting these things as long as it's consensual adults, and you should just take some tips.
And let's be honest,
let the woman take the tip.
you're getting it more than you would if she didn't read romance. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
It has definitely improved.
I wrote down during
Our
this,
sex life.
my notes, I wrote the taboo, the audience. Yes, Hawk. I said, I cannot wait for his POV and the inevitable come to Jesus talk with Kieran. Because we know, like, the
Oh,
next
yeah.
day, Kieran's like,
What the fuck is happening,
yeah,
man?
Are we good? Like, what's up with this,
What's
right?
up?
I thought it was telling that Poppy specifically like notices Kieran by name while this is going on. I wondered if that was perhaps a little bit of foreshadowing,
Foreshadowing, yeah.
looking and thinking about Kieran.
Can I mention, though, that her first orgasm is public
I know.
I know.
exhibition?
Yes.
Right, exhibitionism,
Yeah.
I guess that's what it would be called. But I found that really interesting, because I'm like, if you're going to do that, you'll just do anything.
And
Go for it,
I
girl.
mean, yeah.
pretty much-
she
But
pretty much does.
honestly, he does it. He starts so subtly that she does. You know how you were talking about tuning out the world a second
Mm-hmm.
ago, Mindy? He does it so subtly that she gets to that point without realizing it.
what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
And
yeah.
I mean, you really do go into like a brain fog. And again,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not, ask your partner. to
you're
read
doing
this
it
chapter.
wrong. Right.
Well, and he definitely takes his time too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's what's so riveting about this scene.
Every scene with him.
I
he
know,
takes his
totally.
time.
But like, talk about a slow burn just within this chapter, like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It just there's just something
I
about it.
There's something about it.
I wrote down the dirty talk chef's kiss. That's what I wrote
Well,
down.
he does say, and I would never think this was hot because I don't like being told what to do, but he says, "When you listen to me, I think the stars will fall."
I love that.
and I like
line.
circled it because I was like, yeah, they will. The stars are falling, all right, buddy, right in my pants.
My favorite line of his, though, is when he kind of describes, like, if we didn't have our clothes on, like, this is what I would do. And then he
Uh-huh,
says,
me too.
but we won't do that tonight. We can't. Because if I get any part of me in you, every part would be in you. And I want to hear every sound you make when that happens.
I wrote that down
Dear
too.
God.
I know, right?
I know.
Well, and I wrote down too when that
I think
happens, right? Like
yeah.
he says when that happens.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, confidence is very sexy. So
Yep.
not if, because he says when, even if she is like, this is never going to happen. Because I'm sure she's still thinking that.
Right.
When he says if, it's like, oh, okay.
Right. Like he always talks as if this isn't going to be over.
Right.
Right. Like she's always thinking, well, when we get to Carcedonia,
It's gonna be
this is
done.
gonna be
He's
done. Yeah.
confident enough though, where he knows it probably won't be.
Right. Well, and in her mind, he has no reason to think that. Right.
Well,
Like,
also, I think, he does know what's going to happen with her. He is going to kidnap her still. But I think he thinks that even if they made it to Carcedonia, it would still keep going. He would figure out a way to make it happen.
well, and that's kind of Kieran says later, I think his plans changed before he realized his plans had changed.
Yeah.
And that's what's
Yeah.
happening, right? Like he's
Absolutely.
making plans for the future as if they're going to stay together, even while
because
he's like, well, I'm
still
going to give her
planning on it,
back.
yeah.
In
like
2
no.
pages from now, which we'll get into next week, Kieran's like, do we still have a plan? And Hawk's like, yeah, I know what the fucking plan is, essentially. And
I haven't
Kieran's-
forgotten for 1 minute.
And Kieran's like, oh, okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah. So he basically makes her orgasm, which Congratulations to Poppy.
Yeah.
I know.
Bravo, sis.
Honey, no one's ever had their
Welcome to the
first
sisterhood.
orgasm be that good.
Right? I love how she was so awkward. She said, I didn't really know what to do. Thank you seemed inappropriate. I would have loved it so much if she was like, thank you. Yeah, like didn't know what to say. Oh my gosh.
Then she feels bad though that she's not reciprocating.
I know.
I'm like, aw.
But
I'm like, honey, he probably creamed his jeans anyway.
not yet, but he will in book 2. He does in book 2. I wrote down a couple of teasers from the A Soul of Ash and Blood. I don't know specifically.
Is that Hawk's point of view?
It's going to be
Okay.
Hawk's POV.
I'm
Yeah,
really
sorry.
kind of confused at what the new books are called. So sorry that I.
No, the Hawk POV is A Soul of Ash and Blood,
Which comes out in July.
Yeah. So these seem like they could be during this travel section. They may not be, but it seems that way. So here's one. Kieran nodded. Yeah, but you and I need to talk real quick about her. The muscles along my spine tensed. What about her? I thought her name was Penelope. I frowned. It is. But you called her Poppy. What the fuck was he getting at? Out of everything that just went down, you want to talk to me about a nickname? He raised a brow. Just wanted to say it seems like a cute nickname. So? Also sounds like a nickname those who are close to her would use. Let me repeat myself. So fucking what? And that's the end of that teaser. So that could be earlier. That could be during this travel time. I'm
you
not
know
really
what
sure.
though? And that's something that I think I love about Hawk later. Whenever she consents, always he says, "Thank fucking
Yes,
God."
I'm so glad. Yeah.
Right, because I think the F word is such an amazing sentence enhancer. Because being like, oh my gosh, thank goodness is not the same as thank fucking God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the next one. You surprised me earlier, Kieran remarked. Yeah? I turned my attention back to him. Kieran was now looking in Poppy's direction. You laughed. He squinted. You laughed in a way I haven't heard you do in years. Oh, isn't that sweet? And then this is the last one.
Well, he's been living in torment for
I know.
years and years and years, decades.
I think this teaser happens either while they're traveling or maybe after they get to New Haven. I'm not sure. The skin between Kieran's brows creased as he looked at me like I was missing half a brain. What do you think lust, respect, admiration, and caring for someone adds up to?
La, 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 la.
The only other thing that I wanted to make sure and point out is just that Hawk immediately is like, don't anybody ever call her the maiden or I will slit your throat. Like, he doesn't actually like threaten violence, but
There's a point
Does
where
he
someone
not?
keeps almost doing it, and he's
Yes.
like,
It's
glaring at
Eric.
him.
He says, what does he say to him? It's hilarious.
it's the magic of the forest. And he's like definitely about to call her that,
Penelope.
and then he sees
Yeah.
Hawk's face, and he's like,
Penelope.
like a quick
No, he
save.
says he threatens to knock him off his horse if he calls her the maiden again.
Well, and that's something that continues, right? Like throughout
She's
the
like,
rest of
"It's
the
for my
series.
safety, so no one knows I'm the maiden." It's like, no,
The
it's
maiden?
the maiden. He's like, no, it's because that's not your fucking name.
That's
Yeah.
not who you are,
Yeah.
right? He does that with Alistair in book 2. He does it with his dad in book
Oh,
3.
yeah.
Like, she's not the maiden.
well,
Don't
because
call her that.
it becomes a derogatory term,
Well, yeah.
like calling her like Solus's whore, essentially.
Oh, yeah. That really, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Which some people, I think, do call her that.
Yeah, they do. But I
The
think when
unseen
they
people.
say maiden, they're not saying it as like this revered person,
Right.
Right. Like, it's allegedly supposed to be.
Right.
Yeah. And that's pretty much it.
Yay!
And Poppy does
had
fall.
an orgasm.
Well, and she does go to sleep.
She
She's
does.
very relaxed
and
she
smiles
goes to sleep.
as she falls asleep.
Yeah, he's
And
like,
then
I
admits
was
to
right.
herself that and she admits to herself that he was.
Yeah.
But she
I won't
doesn't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's get into our nerdiest thing of the week. Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Go for it.
I am not sure when this particular episode is airing. I don't know if it'll be either right before or right after Imaginarium, but we are going to Imaginarium Book Festival. I am headed to, thank goodness, I'm taking a trip overseas. And so I'm getting ready for the book festival before I go, because I'll be back literally one day before we go to Imaginarium. So I've been making these really awesome keychains for all of the goodie bags. They say I prefer it between the sheets, and it has a little book on it, and it's super duper cute.
They're so cute.
And then I
They are
made,
really cute.
I think I talked last week about these little like 1-inch embroidery hoops I got. So I embroidered read more books with little stars on it, and I put that in. I'm going to an art show right after, and I'm putting that in their goodie bags, and so everything's been very bookish. It's been really fun.
Yay.
I'm ready
Bookish
for
and
Imaginarium.
crafty.
I know,
yeah.
right? That's me.
Do you want to go, Mindy?
Sure. So I think I talked a couple of episodes ago about how the kids at my school, the 5th graders, have their own little podcast, and they invited me to do a live podcast with them, me and another teacher at the school. And so we did that this week. It was so fun. And like, I didn't really it didn't occur to me, but there were like 200 kids in the quote unquote audience. So we did it in the gym.
Oh,
we did
really?
it. Yeah. I mean, so it was like we had all the
That's
3rd,
fun.
4th, and 5th graders at this live podcast.
You didn't talk about orgasms, did you?
No, we
Okay,
did
good.
not.
What'd you talk about?
Well, it's funny. We didn't even say the name, because obviously I don't want kids looking up our nerdiest thing on there. Yeah.
Please
Oh
don't.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
And same with the other. So we, the art teacher at our school, and you should check it out if you like paranormal. They have a podcast called My Skeptical Sister, and
It's so
they're
great.
sisters. It's so funny. It's basically us if we were sisters and talked about supernatural shit.
100%.
Yeah. There's
And they don't cuss as much as we do or talk about orgasms.
but they do drink a lot. So yeah,
We should have them on the podcast.
that would be
fun.
funny to do
Yeah,
like
do
a
like a
duel
crossover
Yeah.
thing.
We should.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Oh, all right. I'll ask her. But definitely check their podcast out. It's called My Skeptical Sister. But anyway, so we did the live podcast. It was so fun. We had to eat like little sour candies in between.
Yeah.
My favorite one was the toilet one. I know that sounds really weird. So they give
The
me
toilet,
this.
what?
So they hand me this toilet. It looks like a toilet. It's like a plastic toilet, and you open it up, and it's like Fun Dip. Essentially, you get like a little sucker that looks like a plunger.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's hilarious. So it's the sucker looks like a plunger, and then you lick
What
it.
flavor was the Fun Dip? It wasn't chocolate.
I was just about to ask. Did it look like
It was
did look
watermelon.
like doo-doo?
No, it was watermelon.
That's weird.
Yes.
It would make more sense if it did. Look
Or
like
if it was
doo-doo.
like lemon.
Ew.
Ew. Yeah, see, I think I like it better that it was watermelon. But anyway, but it was hilarious. But then the last one they gave me, warheads are disgusting.
Yeah.
I love warheads.
I used to eat them all the
So
time.
like the candy part's fine, and I didn't even mind the sour, but it tastes like cardboard. Like it doesn't really have a
How
flavor.
dare you?
It was nasty.
It does not.
They have nothing. I don't know if they even have these anymore, but I used to eat shock tarts. Now those,
Oh, yeah. No,
that was a sour candy.
I will say, when it comes to like candy that you have to spit out, my favorite candy of all time is Fireballs. And it's hard. I ate one with my son like less than a month ago, and they're still as hot. as
They're
you
like
remember them
cinnamony
being.
though, right?
Yeah, like cinnamon
Yes.
hot.
But it's like
Red
a
Hots
spice.
are my favorite candy.
Oh, I love Red Hots.
Fireballs, like it gets to a point where like your eyes are watering.
Yeah.
Fireballs. So, but yeah,
Fireball.
I like warheads. I
Yeah.
think maybe I like them because they're nostalgic. Though.
I was gonna say, yeah, I like stuff like that I haven't had in a really long time,
Didn't they
just for
have-
the memories.
What was the ones that had the fizzy stuff in them? Oh, what were those called?
Like Pop Rocks?
No, they were like,
Is
oh god,
Razzles.
no, they were like a hard candy, but then when you got into the middle of it, it was like sour
No,
fizzy.
you know what I loved was the Dr. Pepper gum. You would like chew into it, and
Oh,
a big old
yeah.
surge Dr. Pepper came out. Oh, so good.
I think I'm gonna have to go get some like nostalgic candy and have
We
it our
should
next
go to a
podcast.
nostalgic candy store and just buy a bunch of stuff.
That would be awesome.
I don't really eat candy though. Can we go to a nostalgic cake store?
I was gonna say I eat chocolate.
Right.
I'm all about the chocolate.
And I have one more actually. I ended up so I was recommended to read, and it was already on my TBR, Pucking Around by Emily Rath. And I started it. I'm actually reading 2 books at the same time, which I never do. But I started it because I wasn't getting very far in my other book. It wasn't catching my attention. And I stayed up until after 2:00 last night on a work night to like, and I'm not finished it. Like I'm still like in the middle of it, but it's very good. If you like spicy, it's a reverse harem.
I'm glad
It's
you
a
like
reverse
it.
harem hockey romance. I mean, like, God.
What more can you ask for?
I mean, right? Maybe if it had cats in it.
Well,
I mean, they are literally pucking around everywhere. So I do want to point out
They are.
because I want to give a shout out to her, Kelly Finley. She's an amazing romance author. She's doing a reverse harem that comes out soon. And so she was the one that told us about pucking around. So I just wanted to shout out to her.
thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly Finley.
Well, I have a couple. The first one is, I mean, I guess it is nerdy. I'm kind of in like a reading rut because I'm trying to read new things and I'm just like not feeling it. So I think I've decided I'm going to reread some stuff this week just to get some like pages read, right?
Yeah.
You know, I have some shit I can tell you to read.
I've got all kinds of, I have like
Will you please start Savage
6
Lands?
or 7 books
Please.
from KU that are just sitting in there.
Read
I'm just
Savage
like,
Lands.
I mean, I will.
Or
but-
Pestilence, which I have, or any of the other 100 books that I've told you to
I
read.
know, but
I'm so offended.
I just like, I don't know. Sometimes I just get in a rereading kind of thing where I'm like, I want to read this one that I love and that one that you know what I mean? Like sometimes I just feel it. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes this week.
So I want to point out too that for our monthly book club, Whitney convinced everyone to read because she wants to reread Broken Bonds by Jay Bree, and she's like, you know what we should read, you guys. And
Well, to be fair, it is very, I wanted to read a different like genre than what we've been reading for book club.
Yeah.
So
oh, how convenient.
I know, right?
I'm not sad about it.
I'm not either.
Well, I got to reread it and find some like
I know.
English teacher stuff
Here's the
to
thing,
talk
though.
about.
Our friend Holly, who's kind of like, shout out to Holly, who is kind of like our book club leader. She's like, do you guys really want to read something you've already read? And we were like, yes. We do, actually.
I love rereading books that I like really enjoyed, you
love
know?
rereading books, but I will say I have so many books I'm excited about right now, and
Yeah,
I'm the same
currently
way.
reading. There's a standalone book called Conquering the Vampire. I'll have to look it up. Conquering the Vampire King, which is in that Carissa Broadbent Nyaxia series, which is Serpent of the Serpent and the Wings of Night. And it is so fucking good.
Yeah.
That all I want to do is drop everything and read every single one of her books because she is such an amazing writer.
Yeah.
That is all I can say. And neither of you have read those books yet. And motherfucker, get on it, Whitney. If you
Have you read a hockey romance yet?
No, but I will. You need to do one for a book club because that'll get everyone to read it. But
Yeah.
That's true. I
a
should.
really good book to get you out of your rut is The Serpent and the Wings of Night.
Yeah, that's on my list too. I don't know. Sometimes I just get, I don't know. I don't
I'm
know
a
how to
mood
explain
reader.
it. Sometimes it's really hard for me to get into something new, and I don't know why that is. It just is, you know. But my real nerdiest thing is in the past like 24-ish hours, I have made so many infographics to post on our Instagram feed.
So many, though, that I thought she was sending me pictures of something else today. And she's like, are you ready? And I was like, yeah. And then she started singing, and I was like, no.
Stop.
Too many. I was like, I need you to make a Google file because I'm really
I do
confused.
need to do that. I made a graphic for why I think Hawk is not psychopathic or sociopath.
I really upset Whitney when I asked if Hawk was a psychopath or a sociopath.
I think you blew her mind more
you
than
didn't
anything.
upset
She goes,
me.
neither of those, you asshole. And
I
was
did
like,
not say that. Stop
You
that
didn't
now.
say that, but that's the impression that I got. You're like, he is neither of those things.
You know, I didn't really feel like hurt. It was just more like, no,
Defensive.
that's just
I
like
felt
not
like
right.
I
You know what I
talked
mean?
bad about your boyfriend.
Well, you did.
Well, and here's the thing. I still think he's a psychopath, and I'd still
I mean,
fuck
that's
him.
fine. Well,
I would.
That's
I
fine.
don't even care. Like just like Dean
just
Winchester.
disagree.
Dean
Well.
Winchester is definitely a psychopath or a sociopath. One of those because I have trouble with them. But he's a very he's very reactive. And Dean Winchester is a serial killer. I'm sorry if you really think about it, he is, and I would still fuck
Really,
the
they
shit out of
both
him. Yeah, they are.
I mean, okay. You just
You know
have to
what?
look at my graphic.
Drop your moral
for
compass.
why I think that's not correct. But
I
you know,
didn't
whatever.
say Robbie was a serial killer. Your real life, boyfriend, husband.
Boyfriend. He's listening to this right now, driving home from Indianapolis or something. Like, excuse me, how dare?
like,
how dare you?
I would never be a serial killer.
He's like, I wasn't
love
even,
how all of
I
a
wasn't
sudden-
even listening.
All of a sudden, Robbie sounds like your sexual partner.
like, oh, golly, I'd never kill anybody.
How dare you?
For the record, Robbie is an amazing person.
He is. I made an infographic too about what we know about priests and priestesses from the Flesh and Fire series and the From Blood and Ash series and Priestess Analia. I made one for what we know about Craven, what we know about Revenants, what we know about Jansen, and about...
Put them into a Google file.
I'm going to. And for Goddess Penelope's vision of Poppy and Castile.
Did you already send me that one too?
I might have.
Okay, because I'll
put them all in the file.
I got a whole bunch, and I finally texted you back, and I was like,
please stop.
When am I posting these?
But I have so much information in my head from all of this research. It's crazy.
I do post all of our social media, and you guys are super duper awesome about like helping with the engagement, and Mindy helps with tons of engagement. Thank you so much. But sometimes I'm like, okay, am I going to do like another book review today? And because Whitney keeps rereading shit, I don't have as many book reviews.
I can send you reviews of everything I reread too. They're all...
I bet you've already reviewed them in the last like month.
Well,
but
I'll be 5 stars.
Having said that, I think these are going to be super duper awesome. And it was really great because you were talking about the pretty little Poppy bleeding, and we made an infographic about that last week, which would have been like the last week of April. And someone was like, isn't it this? And you were like, no, it's this. And you were so kind. And they were like, oh, you're right. Whereas I would have been like, motherfucker, don't question me. I made an infographic.
Well, but then I also
made your own damn infographic.
I made that infographic about like the Ascended, and people were like, well, but don't forget about this, this, and this. And I was like, oh, man.
So for the record, you put it in the Jennifer Armentrout group which is J.L. Landers, and people were like, well, actually, and then you kept fixing it, and then finally you were like, you know what, if it's messed up at this point, I don't fucking care.
Well, it's like, I'm just gonna have to start over, which is kind of what I did, right? Like I made these new infographics
They're
about
really,
Craven
really
and
great.
Revenants.
So
and,
if you're
it's
not following us on Instagram, you're really missing out. It's Instagram.com/ournerdiest.
And we're very active on
Nerdiest
Instagram.
thing. Oh yeah, I also made one about Victor as a Victor. And what we know about that too. It's a lot. It's a
I was gonna
lot.
say, you've been busy.
I could answer so many questions from Blood and Ash.
You already
Storytime.
could.
So many more questions. But yeah, so that's it for today. Next time, we are going to be talking about chapters 31 and 32. We're getting to New Haven.
Whitney's going to give us blue labia again. I'm just warning you guys.
Sorry, not sorry.
I think you like blue labia. How? I'm just thinking blue oyster cult.
Oh, well, dear listeners, we'll see you next time.
Blue labia.
Bye.